Have you ever wondered why the world's richest banks are suddenly buying more gold than they have in 50 years? Think about that for a second. Why would the people who control the money start trading their own paper cash for heavy yellow metal? Most people think their money is safe because it's in a famous bank in London, New York, or Zurich. They believe the system is a solid mountain that can never move. But history tells a very different story. History shows us that every paper currency has a shelf life. Most of them don't even last 30 years. Today, we are standing on a very thin edge. The ground beneath the global economy is starting to crack. In this video, I am going to show you the hidden patterns that the big banks don't want you to see. I will pull back the curtain on why Switzerland is no longer the safe box it used to be. I will show you why the UK and the US are repeating the same mistakes that destroyed empires in the past. This is not about scary stories. This is about forensic facts and cold numbers. If you stay with me until the very end, I will share a specific survival checklist used by the world's wealthiest families to keep their power when everything else resets. This checklist is the difference between losing everything and becoming part of the new elite. Let's look at the evidence. For over 100 years, Switzerland was the world's bank vault. It was the one place where your money was truly safe from wars, politicians, and prying eyes. If the world was on fire, Switzerland was the cool, calm room where the fire could not reach. But that room is now filled with smoke. In 2023, something happened that changed the rules of banking forever. One of the biggest and oldest banks in the world, Credit Suisse, started to collapse. The Swiss government had to step in and force another bank to buy it just to stop a global panic. But here is the part they don't tell you in the news. During this rescue, billions of dollars worth of specific bank bonds were simply wiped out. They became worth zero. Imagine having a piece of paper that says, "I am worth $1 million," and the government tells you overnight that it is now just trash. This happened in the heart of the safest country on earth. It proved that even Swiss walls have cracks. Furthermore, Switzerland's greatest strength was its neutrality. They didn't take sides. But recently, that neutrality has begun to fade. When a country starts taking sides in global conflicts and freezing assets, it is no longer a neutral vault. It becomes a political tool. If you are a wealthy individual in the UK or the US and you think moving your cash to a Swiss account will save you, you are following a map that is 50 years out of date. The Swiss safety is an illusion, kept alive to keep your deposits inside their system. The truth is, the exits are getting narrower every day. If you think the banking crisis is only a Swiss problem, you need to look closer at London and Washington. History has a very loud voice, but most people have their ears plugged with paper money. Let's look at the British Empire. A century ago, the British pound was the king of the world. It was the global reserve currency. People thought it would last forever. But then the debt started to pile up. By the 1970s, the UK was so broke they had to ask the International Monetary Fund for a bailout. Inflation hit 24%. People saw their life savings lose a quarter of their value in just 12 months. Now look at the United States. Since 1971, the US dollar has not been backed by anything except a promise. That was 54 years ago. Remember what I told you, the average age of a paper currency is 27 years. We are now double that age. The US is currently adding $1 trillion to its debt every 100 days. This is what historians call a debt spiral. When a country owes more than it can ever produce, it has only two choices. It can admit it is bankrupt, or it can print more money until the money becomes worthless. Every empire in history has chosen the second path. They print, they devalue, they destroy the purchasing power of the middle class. Whether it was the Roman Empire clipping the edges of their silver coins, or modern governments clicking a button to create billions of digital dollars, the result is always the same. Your hard work is being stolen through the air. You aren't getting poorer because you aren't working hard. You are getting poorer because the yardstick they use to measure your wealth is shrinking.
Now we must ask the most important question. If the banks are not safe and the dollar is losing its power, what can you actually do? Most people wait for the government to save them, but as we saw in Lebanon and Zimbabwe, the government is often the one causing the problem. The world's wealthiest families do not wait. They follow a specific survival checklist. They move their wealth out of the digital system and into things that have intrinsic value. Intrinsic value means something is useful whether or not a bank says it is. The first item on the checklist is not just gold, but directly owned physical assets. If you own a gold certificate in a bank, you don't own gold, you own a promise. In a crisis, promises are broken. You need things you can hold in your hand. The second item is the Amish hedge. This means buying things that people will always need to survive, like simple tools, seeds, or the ability to purify water. In a total collapse, a silver coin might buy you a week of food, but a high-end laptop will be a paperweight. The third and most vital item is portable skills. This is the only asset that no government can tax and no thief can steal. During the Great Depression, the people who survived best were those who knew how to fix engines, heal wounds, or grow food. Your degree might be from a top university, but if the economy resets, the person who can repair a tractor becomes the most valuable person in the room. This is the forensic secret to staying powerful. Become someone the world cannot afford to lose. The final item is jurisdictional protection. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket. If you live in the US, have an exit plan in the UK. If you're in the UK, look at land in South America or Southeast Asia. The goal is to be a moving target. If you found this forensic breakdown helpful, you are already ahead of 99% of the population. But knowledge without action is useless. Drop a helicopter emoji in the comments if you are ready to start building your own survival checklist. Tell me which country you are most worried about, and I will dig into their data next. The system is changing. Make sure you are the one holding the pen when the new rules are written.
To understand where we're going, we must look at where we have already been. Let's go back to November 1923 in Berlin, Germany. Imagine you are standing in line at a bakery. The price on the board says a loaf of bread costs 200 billion marks. Not 200 marks, 200 billion. By the time you walk from the back of the line to the front, the baker wipes the board clean. He writes a new price, 250 billion. In just 12 minutes, your money lost 30% of its value while you were standing still. People were literally carrying cash in wheelbarrows because wallets were too small, but the paper was so worthless that thieves would steal the wheelbarrow and leave the cash on the street. This sounds like a nightmare from a history book, right? But this same forensic pattern happened in Zimbabwe in 2008. It happened in Venezuela in 2018, and most recently, it happened in Lebanon in 2023. In Lebanon, doctors and engineers who had spent 30 years saving money became poor almost overnight. Their currency lost 98% of its value in just 4 years. Why does this happen? It happens because governments always reach a point where they cannot pay their debts. When they hit that wall, they don't tell you the truth. Instead, they print digital and paper money until the value of each note disappears. The lesson from these autopsies is clear. Wealth is not the number on your bank app. Wealth is purchasing power. If you have $1 million, but bread costs $2 million, you are broke. The people who survived the 1923 collapse were the ones who saw the pattern early. They traded their paper marks for things like silver, gold, and even piano wire or soap. They understood that when the system breaks, things matter more than numbers. We are seeing the same signals today in the West. When you see prices at the grocery store rising every single month, you are watching the slow-motion version of that 1923 bakery line. The question is, are you going to keep standing in line, or are you going to step out and find a different way to pay?
When we talk about silver, most people think of jewelry or old coins. But if we perform a forensic autopsy on human history, silver was never just about money. It was about survival. For thousands of years, before the first pharmacy was ever built, silver was the world's primary medicine. Ancient sailors would drop silver coins into their water barrels to keep the water from rotting during long trips. In the 1800s, doctors used silver to treat wounds and stop infections. It was the magic bullet of the old world. Then, in the 1940s, something changed. Penicillin was discovered. Suddenly, we had a fast, cheap, and easy way to kill bacteria. Modern medicine moved away from silver because it was old-fashioned. It was faster to take a pill. But here is the forensic truth. Bacteria are smart. They have spent the last 80 years learning how to survive our antibiotics. Today, we are seeing the rise of superbugs that modern medicine cannot touch. But guess what? After thousands of years, bacteria have still not learned how to beat silver. In a total economic collapse, the local pharmacy will be the first place to go dark. When the supply chains break, those little plastic bottles of pills will disappear. In that world, a silver coin is no longer just money. It is a tool to purify your water. It is a way to treat an infection when there are no doctors. While everyone else is standing in line with a handful of useless, expired paper money, the person with a few silver coins has a portable hospital in their pocket. This is what I mean by forensic assets. You need things that have more than one job. Gold is great for hiding wealth, but you can't eat it, and it won't fix a wound. Silver, however, is the bridge between the old world and the new. It is the insurance policy that the big banks and the big pharmaceutical companies don't want you to think about. Because if you can heal yourself and trade without their system, they lose their power over you. Imagine it is a cold Tuesday evening in London or a hot afternoon in Texas. You flip a switch and nothing happens. No light, no internet, no way to charge your phone. Most of us think the grid is like the sun, something that is just always there. But if we perform a forensic study on modern infrastructure, we see that the power grid is actually the most fragile thing we own. It is a giant 1,000-mile machine that has no save button. In the US and UK, much of the equipment keeping your lights on is over 40 years old. It was built for a world that no longer exists. When an economy begins to collapse, maintenance is the first thing to go. Governments stop fixing the transformers. They stop clearing the trees near the lines. We saw this clearly in Lebanon. Once the currency failed, the state power company could no longer afford to buy fuel. Suddenly, 24-hour electricity became 2 hours a day. People with millions in the bank were sitting in the dark, unable to even pump water into their homes. Their digital wealth couldn't buy them a single kilowatt of power because the system itself had broken. The forensic lesson here is about dependency. If your survival depends on a wire coming out of a wall, you're a hostage to the system. The world's elite understand this, which is why they are moving toward microgrids. They aren't just buying generators, they are investing in gravity-fed water systems and wood-burning stoves, things that don't need a computer chip to work. They're moving away from the smart home and toward the resilient home. In a 15-minute crisis, a flashlight is enough. In a 15-year reset, you need to be your own power plant. If you're relying on the grid to stay warm or stay fed, you are ignoring the biggest red flag in history. The grid is the umbilical cord of the government. When they can no longer feed the cord, they will use it to control you. Most people think of a tax as something the government takes from their paycheck once a month. But there is a much more dangerous tax that you never signed up for. It is called inflation, and it is the ultimate forensic tool for stealing your time. Think of it this way. Your money is actually just a battery. It stores the energy and the hours you spent working at your job.
When you save that money in a bank, you are hoping that the battery stays full so you can use that energy in the future. But inflation is like a tiny hole in that battery. Every year, a little bit of your energy leaks out. In the US and UK right now, that hole is getting bigger. If the price of your rent, your food, and your fuel goes up by 10%, but your salary stays the same, you didn't just lose money. You lost 10% of your life. You worked those hours for free. Historically, when empires like the Roman Empire or the British Empire started to fail, they used this invisible tax to pay for their mistakes. They didn't want to tell the people that they were broke, so they just made the money worth less. This is a pattern that has been repeated for 2,000 years. In ancient Rome, the government started mixing cheap metals into their silver coins. The coins looked the same, but they bought less bread. Today, the government does the same thing with quantitative easing. They don't need to mix metals anymore, they just add zeros to a computer screen. The result is the same. The person who works hard and saves paper money is punished, while the people who own the hard assets like land and gold get richer. If you want to protect your time, you have to stop saving it in a leaking battery. You have to move your energy into things that the government cannot print. Whether it's a piece of fertile land, a gold coin, or a useful skill, these are the only things that keep their charge when the system decides to reset. The forensic fact is simple. The government can print money, but they cannot print more hours in your day. Protect your time, or the system will steal it from you without you ever seeing a bill. In a world of rising prices, we are told that debt is normal. We are told that having a mortgage, a car loan, and a credit card balance is just part of being an adult. But if we look at the word mortgage itself, its forensic roots come from an old French word meaning death pledge. It is a promise that lasts until you die or until the debt is killed. In a stable world, debt feels like a tool. But when the system begins to reset, debt becomes a heavy iron chain. Think about what happens to a bank during a crisis. When the value of money drops, the bank doesn't want your paper cash anymore. They want your collateral. If you owe the bank $1 million for a house and the currency collapses, the bank will do everything in its power to take the physical house. They know the paper money is becoming trash, so they want the bricks and the land. Most people think they own their home, but if you still have a death pledge with a bank, you are actually just a tenant with a lot of responsibility. The world's elite families have a rule: never be the debtor. They want to be the ones who own the assets, not the ones who owe the money. In a 15-year economic shift, interest rates can jump from 3% to 20% or even 50% very quickly. We saw this in the late 1970s. People who thought they were wealthy suddenly found that their entire monthly income couldn't even cover the interest on their loans. Their American dream turned into a forensic nightmare overnight because they were tied to a system they couldn't control. If you want to survive what is coming, you must look at your debt as a vulnerability. Every dollar you owe is a hook the system has in your back. The goal is to become unhooked. This means paying off small debts first and avoiding new ones at all costs. When the reset happens, the person with a small, modest home they own fully is a king, while the person in a mansion owned by the bank is a refugee. The forensic truth is that you cannot be free as long as you belong to a bank's balance sheet. In a world connected by the internet, we often forget that we still live in physical bodies on physical land. When the financial system begins to fracture, the most important question won't be how much money do I have, but where am I standing? In a forensic study of social collapses, your location is often the difference between being a victim and being a survivor. This is because when a government is in trouble, they look at their citizens as a resource to be harvested. Think about the invisible borders of wealth. In 1933, the United States government passed Executive Order 6102. They made it illegal for private citizens to own more than a small amount of gold. They forced people to sell their gold back to the government at a low price. If you were standing inside the U.S. border, your gold was no longer yours. But if you were standing just a few miles away in a different country, your wealth was safe. The border was a wall that let the government reach into your pocket. Today, we see a modern version of this called capital controls. When a currency fails, like in Greece in 2015 or Cyprus in 2013, the government simply locks the ATMs. They tell you that you can only withdraw $60 a day. It doesn't matter if you have $1 million in your account. If you are standing inside that border, you are trapped. The world's wealthiest people use a strategy called jurisdictional arbitrage. This is a fancy way of saying they don't keep their body, their money, and their business in the same country. If you live in a country with high debt, like the UK or the US, you are essentially a co-signer on that debt. The government plans to pay it back by taxing you. Your final defense is to have a Plan B location. This doesn't mean you have to move today. It means having a second passport, a small piece of land in a different country, or at least a bank account in a place that isn't drowning in debt. In a reset, the most valuable thing you can own is the ability to leave. The forensic data shows that empires usually collapse from the center outward. The people at the edges, the ones in the smaller, more self-sufficient countries, often don't even feel the shock waves until much later. By the time the center realizes the building is on fire, the exits are already crowded. Don't wait for the fire alarm. Look at the map today and ask yourself, if this border closes tomorrow, am I on the right side of it?